What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 34 of the Club Lorcana podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Bertrioni. With me, as always, Zan Syed.
Hello.
And we have an amazing episode for you. Just off top, I wanted to take care of some housekeeping. I wanted to shout out Metagame. Zan, what do you got going on in Metagame coming up with for the viewers?
Sapphire steel items. It's a deck I've been working on since day one. We know it's going to be one of the most powerful decks. It's the deck I can learn from the most, and it's what I'm going to be playing in Southside Gaming. So what I've done is a PowerPoint, and basically it goes over all the combos of the deck, my current list, and then we go into some mulligans. And then basically we're going to be updating the guide as the season progresses. Well, the set progresses. And so basically come Monday, we will be playing some Lorcanito matches and uploading those.
And furthermore, I'd like to announce that on April 5th, a new store is opening in Georgia here. It's called Goobu Games, and they are opening with a Lorcana 5K. So this is announcing a 5K. We will include the link to it in the description down below. But yeah, exciting to have more events and more, high cash tournaments for Lorcana for the competitive scene. If you go, you'll be able to see Zan Syed and myself, as we will both be in attendance.
Yep, I'll be there April 5th. And we're going to be crushing it. And Goobu Games has a nice new location. It looks absolutely amazing. I haven't been there myself yet, but I will be there this Friday as well.
And finally, if you like Spaces on X, I am going to be hosting, starting next week, some Lorcana Spaces. So, if you're a big fan of Clubhouse during the pandemic, this is that, but I'm hosting it. So that'll be really good. I just got off a call with Daniel and Lily, and just Daniel, though, the Lorcana fanatic. He, of course, has the show Vox Lorcana, and he told me everything I need to know, the do's and also the don'ts of hosting a space on Lorcana. So I'll be happy to see you all there. Follow me on X if you're not already. I am at MoxJeremy on X. We're going to be able to join some fancy Lorcana spaces. We're thinking of doing a format where on Monday we do like a weekend report and we talk about some of the top decks. And then on Thursday we do sort of a Q&A where anybody can ask, quote unquote, the pros, whoever I have on and such, and advice about Lorcana. They could do like, play advice general or maybe even specific hands.
Yeah. Maybe I'll hop on for one.
You love spaces, right?
It's the best.
The best thing on X is a space. All right. I like to start our podcast off with a little bit of a metagame report. Since the metagame is not yet established yet, we are in the final days before set 7 hits us like a ton of bricks. We're just going to talk about the, decks as we see it. Everyone says the tier 0 deck is blue-red. That's not what you're playing at the SSG. It's not what I'm playing either. What we're both planning on playing is the blue steel items deck that Zan has cooked up. A deck that, it's fine. A blue steel items deck. I have some backups. So if I don't manage to get the blue steel cards together, because it is going to be day one of a new format, Tamatoas are looking at pre-ordering at $50 each. So it might be tough for me to get a playset. If I don't get the cards together, I'm going to play purple steel, the burn style purple steel deck with the new giant cobra. And if something goes crazy wrong and I don't get that together either, then I'm planning on playing red steel challengers with the new Mushu.
Whoa.
Yeah, red steel's kind of crazy. But honestly, when you're thinking about SSG, last time we were there was a lot of amber steel. I don't think those players are going to be put off amber steel very easily. Additionally, purple steel, sometimes in a new format, people are looking to play an aggressive deck, sort of get in under everybody trying new things. And red steel really punishes aggressive decks. It makes it really hard to play aggressive decks. So that's why it's kind of still in the contention. But it's also the second most popular deck on Dreamborn.inc right now.
Amber steel?
Red steel.
Red steel. Yeah, I mean... yeah, that gives you like a good idea of what to test against for week 1. Amber Steel. Yeah, I mean, SSG did play a lot of Amber Steel. I would honestly be surprised if they ran it back after a new set just came out. And we just talked about like blue-red getting even better.
Well, I just think some of those players are just not going to be off Amber Steel, basically no matter what.
Yeah, that's fair. And yeah, that'll be interesting.
Do you have any backups? If you weren't playing Blue Steel, what would you play?
I'll put Blue Red second, and then third I will play. My third deck will be Green Steel.
Now you have a lot of doomers that are saying that Red Blue is going to be the end of Lorcana as we know it. I was in an argument even today on X with RMB, who says coil is way too good and it's like going to make people leave the game. What do you think? Is this all hype, or do you think that there's something to Red Blue being the tier 0 deck, unbeatable Banzuke of the new metagame?
I think we have to give the format a chance. A lot of people are going to speak it into existence in their small testing groups. Right now we don't have like a metagame, right? Lorcanito is not up and running, and there's not a competitive, and there won't be for a while. Like Lorcanito will be up on March 7th, but it will not be up. The competitive ladder won't be up till the 20 something.
Oh my gosh, really?
So that means that, first of all, I miss Pixelborn because of that. Like, we would already have a competitive, we would already be playing right now. But thankful for Lorcanito. So basically we don't have anything that we're trying to adjust for or trying to achieve right now. And so, in these small testing groups, you get very skewed data, and you just got to avoid that. It's hard. It's hard to not fall into those pit holes. But I think that during these times, take a break, take a breather, and just let your creative side do the work, right? Like, you just build whatever you want. You don't really need to test it until there's a moment that you need to be testing. So if you're going to Southside Gaming, yeah, you might want to do a little bit of testing, but you don't have to do that much, right? Like, you just have to trust your gut and be okay with it's okay to lose at the beginning of the format, but by the end, you gotta have concrete data supporting whatever you're playing.
Speaking of trending decks on Dreamborn.inc, the number one deck right now is a Blue Steel aggressive deck by Heartland Sweet that he calls Kiwi Birds. How's that been? That hasn't been faring very well in my testing.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on Kiwi Birds going into SSG?
Blue Steel aggro is, it's been a lackluster deck pretty much the whole time. The thing that Harlan proved last set was when you catch people off guard and they're not prepared for it, they will lose, right? And you can even make good players pay when they play against something that they don't understand or have never played against, right? Because you're making a bunch of assumptions on what this color combination has going on with it. So now that it's one of the most popular deck lists on Dreamborn, it's kind of become Harlan's thing. It becomes a lot worse. And so I think that when we're all testing against it and we understand that how to identify it in the wild, then that becomes the true test of the deck, whether it's actually good in a known quantity.
One more thing I wanted to talk about. The argument that I had really centered on the card Sapphire Coil.
Yep.
I see a lot of people talking about Sapphire Coil. Is it too good is the question. They're calling for a ban, a day 0 ban or whatever. What are your thoughts on the card Sapphire Coil? In my mind, a card that enables your removal to be better, is not necessarily a problem in and of itself. It's hard for me to picture it being so bad. So the nature of our argument was, he was on turn 5, I banished a Chernabog, the big 9/9, with my 3 ink Sisu, the 1/1 evasive. And he said that that's a problem. What are your thoughts?
I think it's cool. It's a cool synergy, but it's definitely harder to make happen, right? One of the things I used to do when I played blue-red Sisu decks is after when I got to 7, 8, 9 ink, basically I'm not inking unless I absolutely have to. I'm looking for a free way to get ink, how far I'll go, or my opponents let it go or something like that, right? And so I'm trying to save my cards. So when I get to 9, then I'm like, I don't want to ink. Every card I ink is like nothing unless I have an abundance of resources. And so, let's say someone plays a late game Tamatoa and I have to ink 2 cards.
I know. That's what I was thinking too.
It just doesn't add up in my mind. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of times where something doesn't add up in your mind. You just have to play it out and see how the play patterns line up. And so right now, that's kind of what we're missing, right? Like when we're having these in-house testing and like we're like, oh my God, our imagination escapes us. We're like, this blue-red deck was already the best deck. Now it's the bestest deck ever.
Tier 0.
And it hasn't won a single tournament yet.
R&B's like, this card is going to make people leave the game. Do you think that Sapphire Coil is the end of the game?
No, not at all. If anything, like, we can think about Bucky, right? Like, you play Bucky on turn 2. You can shift to Diablo that turn. Your opponent discards a card. And then every card that they play after that may make you discard a card. And that sucks.
That was hard on the game, for sure.
That was super hard.
And it had Ward.
And it had Ward. So now when you think about it, like when we think about this classic version of Sisu Blue-Red, that was a very skill-intensive matchup. Like the mirror match was skill-intensive. So at worst, let's say it is tier 0. We end up with only Blue-Red v Blue-Red. It's still a skill-intensive matchup. So we should be happy about that.
One of the things I want to talk about is this game. It felt like for the last couple sets, or for the first few sets, was in its infancy, and now it's sort of growing into its sort of awkward teenage years. So we're seeing decks that have like multiple versions. So a good example is like with Amber Steel. There's the Steel Song variant where you have cards like Ariel. You're trying to play a whole new world, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's the other variant, which is a lot more aggressive, and it's the one that Brendan DeCandio named Diggy Diggy Hole. Similarly, we have Harlan Sweet's Kiwi Birds, which you've already said is Blue Steel aggro, and it's going to really contrast with the Blue Steel deck that you're putting out on Metafy, which you're calling Blue Steel items.
Yep. There's Blue Steel aggro and Blue Steel items.
Right, but a lot of people are going to say there's Kiwi Birds and now Blue Steel items.
Yep.
And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on deck names in Lorcana. Yeah, I mean, just what's your opinion on those generally?
Yeah, I mean, there's an entertainment aspect of it, and then there's like what's like functionally easy for newer players that are coming into the game, and for people to digest the entire library of Lorcana knowledge, which is a lot. You could say that I could have had an opportunity to name a couple of different decks, right? Like Amber Steel with Flutes in set 3. That would have probably been my first one, but what did I name it? And what did I always call it? Amber Steel Flutes.
Amber Steel Flutes.
Right. And that gives you pretty much everything you need to know.
Right.
But it tells you the color combination. It tells you what's the card that the deck is focused around, right? And so with this new deck, Blue Steel Flutes, it's not Blue Steel Flutes.
Blue Steel Flutes.
Blue Steel items. You can figure out that it has, blue cards, steel cards, sapphire steel cards, and then we can think about what items it has. It probably has Fortisphere, probably has Popsicle, probably has Hiram, probably has Tamatoa, probably has Bell. Like those are cards that you can make assumptions about, right? Like it gives you a core, and you were able to figure that out by the title. I would say like Kiwi Birds really reminds me of like the scientific way of naming things, like which is like or like the exploration way, like Christopher Columbus coming to America and like, this is India.
This is India. So I mean, one of the things I was going to say is I kind of like the unique deck names only because they incentivize people. I mean, so I think first of all, you talk about like a newer TCG player. The profile of that, it's the type of person that wants to like learn something, you know? There has to be an interpreter, sure, because they have to at one point go like, well, what's Kiwi Birds? And somebody has to say, oh, it's like the version of Blue Steel that plays Alice. It's the version of Blue Steel that plays maybe the 5-mana Gantu or the 5-ink Gantu that's a 4/3 quest for 4 or whatever. Those are sort of like Kiwi Birds cards as opposed to like, you know, typical Blue Steel with like Cogsworth, maybe a Whole New World.
Sure.
Those.
Well, we've had a conversation before, and that conversation was about the podcast, and it was like, okay, how are you going to say stuff on the podcast? And so one thing that we did was what you did today, which was like Blue Steel items, and then you were like, no, you're like Blue Steel aggro, aka Kiwi Birds,
right?
And that way, the viewer will understand what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so, so basically, I mean, like, we're going to do the interpretation for them. And I think that, like, let's say we're just saying, you know, Kiwi Birds, you know, Donald Duck or
Kiwi Birds versus Vikings, which is what I'm calling Red Steel, because your guys have to challenge for you to win. They're Raiders, you know what I mean? So Kiwi Birds versus Vikings, who wins?
Versus Shoes, and Bloober.
The Machine.
You know what I mean?
Versus Cephalid Breakfast.
And then all of a sudden you're like, what is this person even saying right now?
I love that moment where you're just like, nobody can understand me anymore. You have to be a Lorcana head you have to be Lorcana pilled, okay? You have to be TCG maxing to understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but even as like I'm like maxing out on Lorcana knowledge, right?
Yep.
I want it to be easier for myself to digest it as well.
Sure.
So as soon as let's say someone's like, let's say someone, what do you call it? Let's say I'm about to play a match of Lorcana.
Great.
And my friend's like, oh, I just played against that person.
Yeah.
They were playing Kiwi Birds.
Right.
And I'm like,
what?
What is that?
What are you talking about, man?
Right? It didn't give me enough knowledge unless I prior knew what that entire the whole everything about that deck. Yet the round has already gone up. I don't have time to figure it out.
Yeah.
So in that moment, if they just went Blue Steel aggro, they didn't tell me anything about the deck except for the color combination and what it has in it.
Right.
And I can interpret it in 2 seconds.
Sure.
And so I think that if we keep the flow of information easier to digest, it's just going to be overall better for everybody. But the entertainment value is very high. And so I don't think that we should completely eradicate them. But in my language, whenever I'm talking about decks, whenever I'm doing YouTube videos, podcasts, even when I'm talking to someone in the shop, I'm going to try and just say Blue Steel aggro, but not the specialty name.
I see a specialty name as a win-win-win. Okay, let me explain. The person who gets to learn a new thing when they learn what the deck is called, that's a win because they like learning that new information. The person that gets to explain it gets to win because they like feeling smart and explaining things. And then the person who named the deck gets to win because now we have an aspirational sense of if you build a deck in Lorcana, you get to name it. You know what I mean? So
okay, what about the person who lost because they thought they were playing against Green Steel because Kiwi Bird sounds like you're playing against Diablo?
So that's win, lose. And that person lost the match. Mm-hmm. So still more wins than losses, you know? Mm-hmm. I think I'm pro unique deck names, but definitely I want to interpret them on the podcast. You know, just for the viewers at home. Like you said, it's a step toward simplification of the game. Our next topic is a step in the other direction. Okay, this is a step to making the game a little less or a little more complicated. Okay, so with this new set, there were some cards that referenced looking at your inkwell and things in the inkwell, and it came up, and some people were asking some questions. And the rules manager for Lorcana, Kyle the Ghost Stash, actually issued, and that's his name, sorry. I mean, that's just what his name is. He actually issued a statement about something that I'm calling positional inking. Okay. What is positional inking? Basically, he said that it's legal and fine in a tournament for you to ink cards and not shuffle them up, and then keep them in zones that indicate what they are. So to be really simple about it, assume that I'm inking all of my 1 drops over here on the left, all of my 2 and 3 drops in the center, and all of my 4 and up drops over here on the right. That way I'm keeping track of generally where cards are in the inkwell. This is allowed. This is permitted in the Lorcana space. I want to talk about one interaction where it really matters. Mm-hmm. So there's the new card, Pongo. This is a 6 ink card that it says at the start of your turn, you can look at all the cards in your inkwell and play a puppy from your inkwell for free.
Okay.
Without paying its cost. This is unique because there's the old card from, I think, set 5 or 6. This is the Lilo, returning the 1-2, the quest for 2 that you can pay 2 at the start of your turn to bring it back. So if you have both of those cards in your deck, you're really incentivized to keep puppies in one pile and non-puppies in another.
Does it say at the start of your turn?
Yes.
Both of them?
They both say at the start of your turn.
So doesn't that mean that you can go Pongo first?
You can Pongo first, but then you can't use that to exert it for the Lilo. So the correct way to do it...
No. Well, why not? Because let's say you go Pongo first.
Okay.
You look at your whole inkwell.
Yeah.
And then...
You play a puppy for free from your inkwell. Yeah. And then the Lilo comes out and you pay 2 to bring the Lilo back. You have 2 ink exerted at the start of your turn. If you do it the other way, you pay for the Lilo, put it out, then look at all your cards with Pongo. And then if you play one of those exerted ink and it's a puppy and you play it for free, then you only have 1 ink exerted at the start of your turn.
I'm missing something.
No, the way you want to do it, you're actually down 3 ink because you're down the 2 ink from the Lilo and the ink from the puppy. If you do it the other way, you're only down 1 ink.
Why can't you... exert the one where you're going to use it for the puppy?
Because you don't get to know what that is. Once the Pongo trigger resolves, you play the puppy. So it's better for that one to be exerted.
No, but can't you just look? So Pongo happens first.
You look, and you have to play a puppy for free.
Okay, so then you just tap the puppy one.
You can't float ink in this game.
I don't understand. So, like, you have to exert before you exert for the puppy before?
You want to exert for the Lilo and then play one of the exerted cards.
What I'm saying is, why can't you just tap for the puppy?
You don't have to tap for the puppy. The puppy comes into play free. But I'm saying it's advantageous to you if the puppy is exerted.
Oh, okay, I see. The puppy just comes in for free.
Yes.
At the start of your turn.
At the start of your turn. But what you want to do is put the Lilo first. And the way that you can know which ones you should pay for your Lilo is if they're positionally inked. So if you have puppies in one pile and non-puppies in another, you pay for the Lilo with the puppies. And then when you look with Pongo, you know one of those is going to be one that comes in. That way you're only down 1 ink as opposed to 3 or 2.
Yeah. Okay. So number 1, there's no way this Pongo is tier 1.
That's true, but I just wanted to bring up a rules example for where positionally inking your cards is very relevant, right? Because you can acknowledge that even though this isn't a real competitive deck, being down 3 ink versus being down 1 ink at the start of your turn is like a pretty big difference.
Yeah, I'm happy to give the puppy deck that advantage. It needs every advantage you get.
But so this is like a whole unprecedented thing. Every deck can take advantage of positional inking. Yeah. And so my first question to you is going to be, are you planning to take advantage of positional inking?
I think like when we first started playing Lorcana, they were like, no. Basically, my thought was like, dang, the person with the better memory gets a huge advantage.
Yeah.
That's not fair.
Interesting.
Because I think that for the most part, you're born with what you get. You know what I mean?
In terms of memory, I think it's something you can stretch out. It's got elasticity to it.
But I think that you have a limit to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? Like, I think that someone can be born with photographic memory, and they have to work a lot less harder to get it to be perfect memory. So now, I think that evens the playing field for that.
Sure.
And so, like, for me, I would say my memory is kind of mid. So I do everything else so well to compensate for my memory. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So step 1 will be that so I just think that positional, what are we calling positional?
I'm saying positional inking. That's literally just something I made up.
Okay, positional inking. That makes sense. I love the way that you named it.
I named it so that people would know what I was talking about.
Okay, that's so genius.
Oh, great.
I'm glad that you didn't name it Kiwi Inking.
Kiwi inking. So there's regular inking and kiwi inking. Kiwi inking is when you care about the position of where you ink things. Spindrift.
Spindrift inking.
Spindrift inking is sweet. Spindrift inking is when you drink Spindrift, and I recommend it.
Yeah, and then you spin the card. Oh, no, okay. Let's get back in topic.
Never.
Okay. So it evens the playing field for the memory aspect of it.
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
And so like, let's say you're playing purple, and you're like, oh, I need to remember how many goats I have. Okay, I have ink to go. Put it off to the side. Now let's say we're doing all of the cards that can gain you lore, right? So giant cobra.
So basically, simplify it, right? You don't have to keep track of every single different card, which you could do theoretically kind of easily with positional inking, but you don't have to. You can just keep your cards that gain you lore artificially over here. This is giant cobra, goat, maybe the white rose, maybe honey marin. Anyway, over here, and then over here, you're just keeping everything else. So you have a rough title of like, out of the 12 cards that gain me a lore, 4 of them are over here. So there's 8 left in the deck. Yep. This is like the way that you're planning on using positional inking?
Yeah, I will use it like that. I was already, when I was playing Blue-Red, this last set, it had Maui Shark. It had Tamatoa. And then it also had Great Stone Dragon. So Great Stone Dragon is looking at characters in your discard pile. Tamatoa is looking at items, and then what do you call it?
Maui Shark.
Maui Shark is looking at actions, right? Because it can bring back actions.
Yep.
So I started organizing my
discard pile.
So I was already doing that with my discard pile, and now I have to add another thing. I think for 99.9% of players, don't worry about this.
Why not?
Because I think that there's so many other things that are going wrong that if you spend energy doing this, it's going to make you worse. Because you have to know a tournament is a marathon, and it takes energy to do that, right? Like for the memory aspect, how did I increase that? I started doing everything the same. Don't use a playmat. Always put my deck this way, and always have water with me. Just keep everything as simplified as possible. Know always where my dice are. Just keep everything as simplified as possible. It increases your stamina and allows you to think about other things. And so that gave me more freedom to play a Diablo in one, look at my opponent's hand, and I just try my hardest to remember that, because that's hard. It's hard remembering 7 cards.
Sure.
And so yeah. In this will give us another tool to remember our inking, and I think it does it in a fair way. The major difference between note taking and this is the time.
I was gonna say I was pretty surprised to see this ruling. To be honest, I kind of don't mind it. I think it's a good ruling, but I just didn't think this was the direction they were gonna go with it. I thought they were gonna be like, you basically, I don't know, maybe you have to shuffle it every once in a while or something. It would hard to be enforced, but it's odd to me that they're like, no, yeah, positional inking is fine, and you can do it.
It makes a lot of sense to me. I'll tell you why, right? Because notes is a time situation.
Yeah.
Right? It's a time situation, and so it can be 5+ minutes. Whereas inking separately is going to be part of that same action. It's going to be less than 5 seconds. And so, in my mind, it doesn't disrupt the flow of the game. And I actually think that it was well thought out. Now, let's say there comes out a way to abuse this, and there's a tier 1 deck that's abusing this in a very unfair type of way. Then they can alter the rule if they need to. But I think that having to shuffle your ink is much more of a tedious process.
Sure.
That a judge will now have to keep track of now too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they were going to do exactly for positional inking. I guess it's just really hard to enforce it any other way.
The is very, very minimal, right? The advantage that actually matters is if you have a perfect memory, then you could have just remembered all the cards that your opponent inked and all the cards that you inked. And if anything, your opponent inking this card that you get to see face up over here helps you remember it too.
Well, you'd have to like pick up on what they're doing because you don't say I'm going to ink Tamatoas over here in my Tamatoa piles. You're just like, oh, ink it's over here. Sometimes it's over here, sometimes it's over here.
You can notice the positional inking or the spin drifting.
You could, but like golly, I can't believe you just said spin drifting. But like sometimes I just ink my stuff like 3 and 3 anyway, so it probably would look the same, or it's like 3 and 3, or maybe 4 and 2, and you wouldn't know, be any the wiser what the code is.
Well, the mind game here is actually to like, shuffle it up.
Oh, if I pick up my ink and I shuffle it up, that means you're gonna lose in my game, 100%. Sorry, I just have it on such lock that I don't.
And you just moved it around. You spin drifted them.
Kind of interesting for the card Ink Geyser, because it makes you pick up cards from your inkwell at random. The way that I usually do it is pick the whole thing up and shuffle it around. But if I'm positional inking, now I'm rolling a die for everyone and trying to keep everything in place. So like keep the position secure. That's like an interesting place where it like might come up.
And then if you're low on time, you got to just spin drift it.
Another demographic affected by this positional inking is people that use ink trackers. For those of you that don't know, using an ink tracker is whenever they ink a card, they sort of put it over in like the corner of their playmat. I'm sure you've seen people do this. And then they bring over like maybe like the back of a playing card or a Pokemon energy or something, and then you use those to keep track of their ink or whatever. It's going to be a little harder to positionally ink with an ink tracker. Although, as I'm saying this, I'm realizing that they can just, like if they ink a Tamatoa over here or whatever, they just keep that ink tracker over in there where the position would be. So maybe not. What are your thoughts on ink tracking?
Actually, I had an opponent in Vegas, day 2, top 64.
Okay.
That was using poker chips.
Poker chips. How did that work? Did they like keep their exerted ones over here and their unexerted ones over here? Like how'd it go?
I mean, they were playing with it constantly. I had to constantly ask them how much ink they had. I couldn't tell. I feel like it gave them an advantage. I want like, what is this called? What is it called again?
What, positional inking or ink trackers?
Ink trackers.
Ink trackers is like what they're calling it.
Yes, ink trackers. I feel like there needs to be some limitations on them. Like they need to be exactly the same size.
Sure.
And they need to be placed exactly like your regular ink, because it just gets confusing. If like someone's like playing with poker chips, you're like, can you just put them down? You're not allowed to pick them up.
You can't pick those. You can't touch those. It's so funny because when you're playing poker, you'll ask like, how many chips do you have? And then now that you're playing Lorcana, you're like, how many chips do you have? Like the question doesn't change at all.
It's terrible.
It's terrible. Well, I mean, what are the pros? Like what? So I'll be honest, I might not be the best person to talk about this because I don't know why people are ever using ink trackers.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So the pro is it's another way for people to express themselves. It's kind of not within the game, but it's within the rules. So it's a way for people to express themselves. I get that part. But I do think that it's a shared clock. We're not playing with chess clocks, right? If you had chess clocks, I think it's totally fine. You do whatever you want, because this is going to definitely take more time, right? 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute. I definitely think it ends up adding up to being a minute or more.
I mean, I've seen Chris Anderson do it. He does it like pretty fast.
But I'm saying, like, let's say there are 100 players. Are all 100 players on Chris Anderson's level of doing that?
No, probably 3 of them are. Probably 3 people have that.
Okay, so let's say let's take the average of the top 100 people.
Okay,
I feel like ends up taking an additional minute. That minute wasn't just yours; it was also your opponent. So I think that it is a net negative, but I'm like open to hearing what other people have to say. So if you use them or you think that there's no downside to them, leave a comment, explain. I may change my position.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know the pros. I think expression probably isn't what they're telling you when you sign on to the Ink Tracker Club. You know what I mean? So like, leave a comment. Let me know why you use Ink Trackers. I don't get it.
From the perspective of playing against it, I hate it.
A lot of the times I just think to myself, like, what an extra thing. You know what I mean? Like, even if it's nothing, I'm like,
I feel like you're getting tired. You're like,
they're like, I'll ink my card, and then they like go to a separate pile and like put it in the inkwell. And I'm like, oh my god!
like, what game are you playing? You gotta have 2 decks.
I guess, yeah. So that's ink trackers. Moving on, final segment of the podcast.
Yep.
I wanted to bring something a little fun, so I had you and me do a top 3 sleeper cards from set 7. This is cards that you might not have heard very much about, the unsung heroes of spoiler season. Dan, why don't you get started? What's your number 1 sleeper card of the set?
It is Tramp.
Tramp is a 7 ink.
The green yellow one specifically.
The green yellow one is a 7 ink 2/6 that quests for 2. Obviously terrible stats, but it costs 1 less for every creature that you have in play. This is one of the best cost reduction effects we've seen on a character. And when it enters, you can draw X and discard X, where X is your other creatures. So the same amount that it costs less by. Talk to me. Why is this card so good?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's so good. It's just like a unique effect for a deck that's about being super aggressive and often is probably going to flood on 1-drops. And so give it away to get rid of those 1-drops.
Yeah, get rid of the 1-drops. And then also, with this Tramp, we've noticed that it comes with its own like suite of cards that it like supercharges. So things like Turnabog, the set 3 Turnabog, or maybe set 4, that costs 1 less for every character in your discard pile. If you draw 5, for example, and discard 5, then you might have just like supercharged out a Turnabog. So a really common play pattern, when I was in testing is I would do Tramp into maybe even another Tramp, because if I have like 4 ink and the first one costs 2, then the second one just costs 1, or 3 ink, and the first one just costs 2 and the second one just costs 1. If I have 5 guys in play.
What world is this?
This is I'm just living in it, baby. So you can go Tramp,
aren't we all
4,
like
4.
starting off
Second Tramp, okay, draw 3, discard 3.
Aren't we like starting off by being like, yeah, blue-red Sisu decks are so good, and then we're like, yeah, this 2/6 that becomes a 0/6.
Yeah,
with a coil, a Sisu can get rid of it.
It doesn't need to. It dies to a Sisu anyway if they have 8. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't need.
No,
to
I'm
get
talking about the baby Sisu.
Baby Sisu.
And then on top of it, it has 0 ways to remove a baby Sisu. So you see the big Sisu coming, and you just like pray.
How are they gonna beat this? Tramp, Turnabog, go.
And then you're like, coil trigger, Sisu, boom.
First of all, they're going to be like, Judge, how did they have so many cards? I don't understand. If they have 5 guys in play and then they Tramp, that Tramp's their last card. So they're milling 5 is like how I feel. But anyway, there's a suite of cards that are good.
The way that you went, like, if I was playing blue-red against them, you know what I would do? I would just like make it a mission to just mill them out.
Yeah.
I'll just be like, okay, play your Tramps, mill yourself out. Let's keep going.
It's like so impossible to mill out like an aggressive deck. But anyway, the other card in the suite is the new Slipper. This is the 2 ink uninkable. Basically, you need to get it.
That's why it's mill proof. The Slipper.
Oh, because the Slipper goes on the bottom.
Okay, I won't even attempt it then.
Yeah, don't even try it, because they have the Slipper. Basically, when it's in your discard pile and you play the new Cinderella, that is a 4 ink 2/4 quest for 2, you can put the Slipper on the bottom of your deck to gain 3 lore. This is an artificial lore gain in Amber, which you don't see a lot of. And it's a lot better when you have something like Tramp to loot, because the Slipper is ordinarily pretty difficult to get in your discard pile.
You know what would feel terrible? If you played a Tramp and then drew all your cards and then discarded, and then you drew a Slipper your next turn.
I mean, that's just going to happen. The idea is that you have other cards. So I'm playing in that deck the new Yzma, so I can draw a card, discard a card, and it's Slipper. Genius.
Oh my god. Such a bad card.
Amber also has access to princes, so you might be able to use the Slipper to tutor up the Cinderella if you're like... Anyway, my number 1 pick for underrated card is Tramp.
The green one.
The green one. This is 2 ink. It is inkable. Both Tramps are inkable. Thank you very much. This is a 1/3. It quests for 1. It costs 1 less if you have a character named Lady in play. And when it enters, you choose one of your characters, and it gains a strength for each other character you have. The way this works is very simple. If you have 1 character and you play a second one, and then you play the Tramp, then it gets +1. 2 characters, and then you play the Tramp, then it gets +2, and so on and so forth. I see this as the green Merlin crab. This is like a way to deal with locations that are problematic, a way to deal with big bodies, potentially trading up. A way for maybe your Go-Go Tamago to take out a Maui Shark or something like that. That's a little pie in the sky, but I think that this could take the slot of Cricky, which was a little bit clunky. Now, I'm not saying Cricky didn't win games, because it definitely won games, but it was a 5-drop, and maybe this 2-drop is like an upgrade. So I'm liking the new Tramp.
Not a believer. I'm not a believer. All right, let's break it down. Green, purple. Okay, you play Diablo on 1, you play Tramp on 2. Oh, it's a 1/1. Not great.
That's good.
No, terrible. Let's put in Green Steel. Like, Green Steel's max trying to play 3 characters, and you're not trying to swing. If you have 3 characters in play, you're not trying to swing at a location. Unless you have to. And Cricky is going to put down a more relevant body and guarantee getting rid of that location. Like, a Tramp giving you +3 is not going to be enough for you to get rid of anything relevant. So I'm not a big believer in the card. It's okay. I think it's best in this yellow-green deck because it takes advantage of Lady. But other than that, I don't think it sees any play outside of it.
I think Tramp is great. Zan, what is your pick for number 2, Sleeper?
Unconventional Tool.
Unconventional Tool. This card is 1 ink. You can ink it. All of them you can ink so far. We're really looking forward to inking cards. This is an item that whenever it's banished, your next item costs 2 less. So, Zan, what do you see in this
Super cool combo with blue-red. You go Bell. You get rid of this Unconventional Tool. On your turn 2, play a Fishbone Coil, play Maurice's Workshop. That's broken enough.
Great. I mean, those interactions are definitely really good. For me, my number 2 sleeper of the set is the new Kianon. This is the bear. This is the magical bear. This is a 3 ink inkable 1/4. It has Challenger 2, and it quests for 1. And during your turn, whenever it banishes another character in a challenge, you gain a lore. No, that's not true. Whenever it is banished in a challenge, you gain a lore and you can return it to your hand. So this thing's great. It hits for 3, potentially trades, and if it does trade, it goes right back to your hand for you to deploy again. I think this is a great way for purple decks to sort of grind out middle aggressive opponents.
Let's rewind to blue-red.
Okay.
Sisu.
Oh my gosh.
Sisu.
Does this thing die to Sisu? I didn't know.
And you can just ignore it. It's a 3-drop that you're like, does this even matter?
Does it matter at all?
It only quests for 1.
This is the purple Calhoun.
If it quested for 2, I would be like, yeah, this is the guy. And if it's on your opponent's turn, not your turn. If you got to challenge a character and it died and it got returned back to your hand.
No, that is what it does. It's during your turn.
Oh, it's only during your turn.
It's only during your turn.
Oh, so a fox also just wrecks it.
Yeah, it only being during your turn is really bad because
it needed to be both.
It needed to be both. It should have been both. It should have been like a gale that.
That's what I was thinking it was. I was like, oh, okay, it might be like passable. But it's like -%.
No, it's only during your turn. So
your opponent gets to see it happen, like it's in front of them, and they're like, I'm not gonna let this happen.
Or I'm gonna let this happen because if they kill one of my guys and trade and then spend 3 on this, I'm gonna win.
Yeah, let's just ignore this.
Okay, well then I'm changing my answer to the new cool Cusco Whale. That once a turn you get to return something to your hand and draw a card.
That sounds fine, I guess.
It's a good way to get value, but it also dies at 3 ink Sisu, and this is a 5 ink uninkable card. So
oh my god.
We're cooking over in Purple Land. We got bad cards.
All right, let's go to my last card.
Your last card.
Show me more.
Show me more. Show me
my
more.
opponent draws 3 cards. I draw 3 cards. It costs 2 uninkable.
And it's an action.
Yeah. I just like this effect. It would be great for the purple steel deck as the 5th dock, 6th dock. But I mean, of course, like it still needs to find a home, but it would most likely be in an aggressive strategy. Could be in a yellow purple. So we should definitely give it a shot.
The thing about Show Me More is, to me, it compares really weirdly with Amethyst Chromacon. So why would you play one over the other?
Why would I play one over the other? I think that like if there's like a blurple item shell Amethyst Chromacon would fit better. But now with this card, you need more gas faster, right? Like let's say you were playing all 1-drops, and you can on turn 5 you can just go this card, draw 3 1-drops, play all 3 1-drops, go. That's kind of scary.
Pretty strong. All right, so for me, my number 3 sleeper of the set is Bell. No, not the free one. I'm talking about Bell, the unconventional inventor. This one costs 9, and it's inkable. It has shift 7, but the shift costs 1 less for every item card in your graveyard. It's a 7/7 that quests for 3, and whenever it quests, you can return items from your discard pile back into the bottom of your deck for up to 3. For each one that you do, you gain a lore. So this is a surprise 7/7 that quests for 6 the first time it comes out, most of the time. This is a card that a lot of people overlooked because it was sort of like the first, it's a starter deck card. It's one of the first multicolor cards we saw. But in testing, it's just been really good. It's been an extremely fast clock, and it's a body that's so big that it's not guaranteed to go away. A lot of the times, characters, like I think the new Tamatoa is going to be like, you quest with it once and then it's dead, basically, most of the time. And Bell isn't guaranteed to be dead. Bell might live. So I really like the new Bell.
I think it should just stay in starter decks. Basically, I think that in testing, especially without a meta, like we don't have Lorcanito yet, we don't have tournaments yet, right? So, like, I think the way that you can break this down is like, is it better than Tamatoa?
No.
Is it better than Maleficent?
Sometimes.
Maleficent is really important in the mirror, and we're saying it's going to be tier 0, right? Whereas this card can gain you 6 lore out of nowhere. Tamatoa can just do way more, and it replaces itself.
True.
Right? And you're in that matchup, you're trying to ink those bells. You're not trying to play a bell. And then do you really want to put your items at the bottom of your deck and not bring them back?
Bring them back with any of the Tamatoas, the new one or the old one?
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting because, you can do like coils or like maybe 3-drops that you sacrifice for Hiram. You put those back on the bottom, but you leave your popsicles in there.
Yeah. I mean, of course you can do that, but I think another main thing about this card is it doesn't cost less for regular cost. So it's a 9-drop just sitting in your deck.
This card makes me want to like fill my own graveyard. So I really wish there was a Lorcana card that said whenever you draw a card, instead you can put this from your graveyard to your hand and then discard the top 6 cards of your deck. We'd have a different conversation. I want to dredge in Lorcana.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
That was a mechanic in Magic the Gathering. It let you, instead of drawing a card, you could mill a certain number of cards, 6 or 5, and put the card back in your hand, and that is fun. I want to be doing that in Lorcana. I think it's a good mechanic. I think they should hire me for R&D, and I'll print a lot of dredge cards.
All right, so now that we've talked about all 6 of these cards,
okay,
what would be your number 1 out of these 6?
Oh, it's definitely the green-yellow tramp.
Come on. It's unconventional tool.
Unconventional tool is so like unexciting to me.
It's so unconventional.
It's not that unconventional. It's an item in your item deck.
Come on, buddy.
It ramps out items.
You don't think Black Lotus is good?
People don't know what Black Lotus is because I got criticized for talking too much about Magic the Gathering, so I'm not going to bring up Magic the Gathering. Black Lotus,
let's just say it's expensive.
What? Yeah, we could definitely say it's expensive. I heard you gave one away once.
I did.
That was cool. That was cool. We got to do a similar giveaway for Lorcana sometime. Anyway, that's going to be our podcast for this week. I am your host, Jeremy Bertrani. You can follow me on Twitter at MoxJeremy, and you're going to want to do so because pretty soon I'm going to be posting announcements about spaces that I'm going to be running. I'm thinking to do 2 spaces a week of Lorcana, and it's going to have all your favorite creators. Comment below what creators you'd love to see in a Twitter space with me about Lorcana. And Zam, where can they find you?
You're already here. Thanks for watching.
Wow, bye.
See you next time.